This next question was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag corny drive-thru from Bronco Bronson.
Bronco Bronson.
That's right. A friend of yours?
That is indeed. The only person I've ever known named Bronco was Lubitsch. But he spelled his with a K.
That's right. One of the worst referees of all time.
Oh, come on now.
He was a very good wrestler. He was a horrible referee.
He was.
I saw him count with his foot.
Yes, he would do that. The Mr. Ed, like ask the horse, what's 2 + 2? And they go 1, 2, 3, 4 with it. On spot shows, especially and it wasn't really fair because a lot of times the guys would do this. A hot building or a spot show, the middle of summer or whatever, a long night, because sometimes those world-class shows only had one referee, and they'd do so many false finishes. They'd be getting up and down, and finally Bronco would just lean back against the ropes and count with his foot. But he was a very nice man, and what a financial genius. Saved his money in wrestling, ended up not only Fritz's right-hand man for so long, but was very well off as a result of his time in the wrestling industry.
That's right. Well, here's Bronco Bronson's question. What are Jim's thoughts on Renee Young recently revealing that WWE made her take classes to hide her Canadian accent for her television appearances? Is this a common practice for WWE or other wrestling promotions in general when it comes to their Canadian talent?
Well, honestly, I know that they've been that way about Southern accents, and JR's accent, and Lawler, and etc.
Even WCW was. Didn't they make Missy Hyatt take classes to hide her Southern accent?
Yes, and of a company based in Atlanta, Georgia. Because they thought, well, it's supposed to be nationwide. Well, I always said, and nobody ever said that to me because I was a talent. I can talk any way I want. And then when I was doing the announcing, I was already established, right? But the whole idea of a regional accent being somehow detrimental on television is ridiculous because everybody's from somewhere. And people in Chicago have a distinctive way of talking. People in Virginia have a distinctive way of talking that's a completely different Southern accent from people in Kentucky or Tennessee or Mississippi. Some Virginians sound almost like a Cajun accent from Louisiana, the way they pronounce some things. But then, of course, there's the all-time champion of goofy-sounding accents, and that's New York. And think back to Shitstain. You can still hear him some places, not that anybody wants to. They had him doing commentary, thankfully, only for WWF New York, the show they used to have on WOR, and you couldn't understand a word he was fucking saying. But to them, it was normal because they lived around people who spoke like that, so they didn't hear anything wrong. And so I would say, wait a minute, you think so-and-so has an accent, but this is right? You can understand this? It didn't make any sense. As long as somebody is a good broadcaster and knowledgeable about what they're talking about and the program that we're on or that they're on, it doesn't make any difference what they sound like, as long as you can understand everybody. So, but I didn't even know Renee Young had a Canadian accent. And except for the abooped thing and them calling Z, I don't know why anybody would be offended. Unless she's not your buddy guy. I'm not your guy, pal. I'm not your pal friend.
She was hired. She had experience. She was already on TV. She was already a presenter, whatever she was doing. And they bring her in and say, okay, let's change you.
Yeah. Well, the first WWF TV that I made in 93, maybe it was the second one. Maybe it was the following day. Because the first one, I didn't do pre-tapes and stuff because that was my introduction. But then the next day, I was starting to do pre-tapes and I was with Yoko, so I was starting to do local promos. And even back in those days when they were at the smaller buildings for Raw, they would carry their own pre-tape rooms that they would set up. I know everybody's how do they build their own room? That's, you know what I'm talking about, the soundproof baffling that they would have sections of, that you could construct small cubicles in the back of a big arena, and there was room for several of them, and they would shoot different promos, like in one would be for syndication, and one would be for stuff they needed on Raw, or one would be for local promo inserts in the various local programs. And you would go from one to another, and you'd sit there and do all the promos in that room, and then you go to another one. And anyway, I'm back there, and the first couple of promos I'm doing, they didn't know the producers, the technical people, because back then they still had technical people that just worked there as a television job. They didn't follow wrestling. See, that was the weird thing to get used to, even in WCW, because they inherited a lot of Crockett's guys, and they'd already been shooting the TBS show. They got a lot of new camera people and things, but there was always, everybody knew who people were in the wrestling business. Most of those people at the start had gotten into television because they were in wrestling instead of the other way around. But I go up there and I figure out the producers and technical people then, they had taken it as a television job. They didn't have any idea of what was going on in wrestling or any other company, right? And that was a departure, because I still at that point wasn't even really used to talking smart around civilians in the locker room or in the back area. And I'm like, fuck, they don't know what the fuck about wrestling, but they're here. So anyway, I cut a couple of promos, and then we took a break for a second while they were changing lights or whatever. And one of the producers came over and said, you know, you're really good at this. He said, I just want to let you know that if you're thinking about doing this on an ongoing basis, maybe you ought to get your glasses tinted because we're getting some lighting reflection. Like, that was my first day ever doing this. They had just found me somewhere, and I was going to, you got some promise, kid. But if you're going to keep on doing this, you might want to get some tinted glasses.
Oh, I wish we had gotten to see that. You with tinted glasses on TV.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, these are the ones that I kind of see out of, and just work around it. I'll keep moving my head a lot. It won't be too fucking bad. But yeah, he had no idea. He's like, have you done this before? And I thought, because I knew the boys like to rib, I thought, is somebody trying to wind me up? But then I realized that no, he didn't know. I said, you watch a lot of wrestling? He said, well, only this program we work on here. I said, okay. All righty then.